planning and design firm specializing in medical imaging facilities. He founded his own consulting firm called Gilk Radiology Consultants and provides training, consulting, and safety review services to providers and manufacturers alike. Tobias was one of the founding board members of the American Board of Magnetic Resonance Safety. I think we heard that one other time before. And he currently serves as the organization's chair. He holds ABMRS board certification as both an MRSO and an MRSE. He was a two-time member of the ACR MRI Safety Committee. He was a co-author for the 2020 manual on MR safety, and I hope everyone is using that. He's an author and co-author on multiple published MRI safety papers and articles. He has spoke national and international conferences, and of course the most important conference, the one you're at today. Please welcome Tobias Gilk.
Thank you very much. So we are doing a mad dash to try and find an adapter that works with everything.
Do you want me to sing?
Yeah, we'll split the remote control and...
How many things can you plug into one computer?
I think we're trying to figure the limit of how many things can get plugged in at once. I don't think we're quite there yet.
Hey, there's something on there.
All right. Okay, so we're going to move this over, and we're going to do this.
Where's the pack?
Right there?
Great, thank you.
All right. And, hey, my clicker is working. All right. Better late than never. If you haven't noticed, we're videotaping this presentation and the next one. So you may just want to touch up your hair and makeup or whatever in case you get in frame. So they already introduced me, that's me. Because I'm a member of the ABMRS board and I get to see all of the questions for the certification exams for MRMD, MRSO, MRSE, I like to put up this little disclaimer that essentially says, I'm going to be talking about safety stuff and I'm not giving you any of the answers to any of the questions. Sorry about that. I know that different presentations, some folks are presenting sort of proprietary or confidential information. I'm just letting you know that everything you see on the screen is for your consumption. So feel free to take snapshots of what you want. If you downloaded the slides, the PDF of the slides, I am not one of these annoying people who updates the slides the day before the presentation. I'm one of these annoying people who updates it 10 minutes before I go on stage. So if you downloaded the PDF and you're following along and all of a sudden you get lost because there's something different on screen than when you have on the page, know that I have changed this. I will get Larry a finalized version of this so you can have the end product slides. So first of two talks, and you will see some common threads between the two. Root causes of a tragic MRI accident. We're going to talk about what happened, one specific accident. We're going to talk about why it happened. And to my way of thinking, we're going to talk about the most important piece, which is what can we learn from this? Everybody, when an accident occurs and everybody's emailing around pictures of it and we're all kind of laughing and pointing and it's like, oh, thank God that wasn't us, right? If that's the end of the conversation, we've missed out on an amazing opportunity to learn something to shape our practice. I admit, as much as anyone else, I share the pictures and I do a little bit of laughing and pointing, but that can't be the end of the interaction with this accident, right? So, what happened? What accident are we looking into? You've probably seen this picture before. This accident happened literally, I think, a year ago today. This is a hospital in California, and if all you know about this accident is this picture, you don't know enough in order to reflect on your own practices and figure out what of this do I need to think about in terms of reshaping my own practice. So, okay, so everybody's seen this picture shared around before, and we had our laugh and we pointed at it and we said, thank God that's not us, right? What else do we know about it? What else about this accident is in the public domain? This is the US FDA MAUDE report for this specific accident. Now, the MAUDE reports don't identify specific facilities or whatever, but reporting is so bad that if you know the date on which an accident happened and some of the particulars of the accident, like, oh, I don't know, hospital bed, you can go into some of these, and if it was reported to the FDA, you can pull out the data, right? Okay, so we started out and all we knew was the picture, and we laughed and we pointed and went on with our daily lives. And if you hunt and peck and you find the FDA MAUDE report on that, what do we learn? This is the entire description of that accident as it appears in the FDA MAUDE database. It was reported that a hospital bed was taken into the scan room. When it became attracted to the magnet, a staff member sustained injuries which required medical treatment. What of that, other than hospital bed being brought into the room, what of that tells us what the contributing causes were? Nothing, right? This is the news report that says a car wreck happened on I-70, right? Did it happen because the driver was drunk? Did it happen because there was an incredible fog bank that rolled over the freeway? Was there another broken down vehicle and, left parts strewn across the middle of the freeway and somebody was driving 70 miles an hour through a field of shrapnel? If we don't know why the accident happened and what the contributing causes were, there's really no point for us to know anything about it. There's no value in knowing that an accident happened. The value is in knowing why it happened. And we collectively, radiology, MRI as a profession, have become really uncomfortably okay with the idea that we don't really need to know. It's not important that we know why. And I personally think that that's a very poor choice on our part as a profession. So let's talk about why. Before we really get into the why of things, I think we need to have a better understanding of exactly what happened. Yes, the bed winds up inside the magnet room, and yes, somebody winds up getting hurt. But I think we need to understand a little bit more about the sequence of events that led to that. So, as I will show you in a little bit, there were 2 reports done on this accident, which one report is a rarity, 2 is the stars are aligned in a magic position or something that allowed us to get 2 public investigative reports on this accident. One of the 2 reports was from OSHA because the staff member who got injured was a nurse. It becomes a workplace injury. OSHA swoops in on their white knight, arriving to identify what went wrong because it's a workplace accident. OSHA, in their report, included a floor plan, and this is just a recreation at scale of the floor plan from the OSHA report. Now, I've done my best to try and recreate the size and shapes of things, but this is just a PowerPoint, so they may be off a little bit. If you are not comfortable looking at a floor plan and feeling like you understand what's being represented, all a floor plan is a coronal view of your building with a 1 meter slice thickness. Literally, that's what a floor plan is. All right? So if that helps you orient. So we have the magnet room, we have the MR scanner, right? Woo, let's get this thing to work right. We have a patient transfer vestibule space, and we have a control room. In the control room, we've got the rad tech and a tech assistant. Oftentimes, when an accident happens, we're real quick to latch on to the, well, we need to have 2 techs. We need to have a second person in the facility. That was not a factor in this instance. We have 2 MR safety trained individuals working on shift in that moment. So what happens? Patient comes into the ED. ED docs say, this patient needs an MR. There's only 1 magnet in this hospital. And they're not just sitting around twiddling their thumbs waiting for a patient to show up. They've got a full schedule of outpatients. ED calls up the MR and says, we have a patient, we need you to scan them. And MR says, is this a true stat? I mean, do we need to pull the patient off the table now? They're like, no, we're doing some other workup on it. We just know that the patient's gonna need an MR. It's like, well, we got a patient on the table and we got another one that's waiting. We can squeeze you in. We can block a chunk out in about an hour. Can you bring the patient an hour from now? And ED says, sure, fine, not a problem. An hour comes and goes, no patient. An hour 5, an hour 10. They've held this slot open. They've essentially booted another patient to hold the slot for the ED patient. Patient doesn't show up. They pick up the phone, they call the ED, and they're like, where the hell is your patient? We rearranged our schedule to squeeze in your ED patient. They're like, oh, no, they found a bed up on the floors. The patient's been admitted. So you told the floor nurse that this patient had a scheduled MR, right? You should probably call the floor. So they call the floor nurse knows nothing about the fact that, and they just got the patient up and they're getting her situated in the room. They're like, well, we can't bring her down right now. We can probably have her down in, half an hour, 45 minutes or something like that. Fine, we'll squeeze in, we'll get another outpatient in, and then we'll hold the next block open so you can bring the patient down. They're like, please call us before you come down with the patient so we know that you're actually bringing the patient this time. So the phone rings and somebody from the floor says, we're bringing the patient down, right? So if you look at the arrangement of this space, right? This MR patient transfer area is really pretty tight, very small. Now this particular MR scanner has an undockable table. So we know that the inpatient's coming down from the floors. The rad tech goes into the MRI scanner room and undocks the table, getting everything as ready as possible for when the patient arrives. Now the magnet room is so small that undocking the table kind of blocks the door open a little bit. So you can't close the door. Hospital policy was you keep the door closed. Well, taking this preparatory step for the patient coming down makes that more difficult, right? So in comes a nurse, the ICU patient, and the nurse's aide. Despite the fact that the nurse was identified by the hospital as being level 2 MR safety trained, and with level 2 training often comes independent access to zones 3 and 4, this nurse was not given independent access. So she has to go and knock on the door, or ring the doorbell, hi, I'm here, please let us in. So the rad tech comes down to open the door and let the nurse, the ICU patient, the nurse's aide, into the MR department. Now, 2 things have to happen before the MR exam can begin. One of them is we have to get the patient to the MR. The other is we have to register the patient as having arrived in MR, right? Now, if you look at the arrangement of spaces in here, When that ICU patient comes in, if they come in the door and go straight in, they will functionally block the path for the magnet undockable table to come out. So what has to happen in order for this to work right is the ICU patient has to come in, and then they have to slide to the left to make room for the undockable MR table to come out. This nurse, who is level 2 safety trained, this is her second time ever being in this MRI suite. So not somebody who's familiar with how workflow has to work in this space, right? So the rad tech opens the door to let them in, and the rad tech has to register the patient as having arrived in MR. So rad tech goes into the control room, nurse, ICU patient, and nurse's aide come in, and in order to get far enough in that the door behind you can close, you more or less have to be in the doorway to the magnet room. Here there becomes a little bit of a disagreement of who did what. The nurse who was at the front of the table says the nurse's aide kept pushing the ICU bed, and I was just backpedaling to keep from getting run over. You might imagine that the reverse statement was said when they asked the nurse's aide. The nurse's aide said, yeah, the nurse kept driving the table into, or the patient bed into the room, and I was just following along. Whichever of those is true, or combination thereof, we wind up in this situation, where the ICU bed gets just close enough to the magnet that it flies, and it pins the nurse between the ICU bed and the magnet. In this moment, the tech aide leaves, post-haste. No. For legitimate reasons, the ED is down that way, and the tech aide is going to the ED department to get emergency response. Why they didn't just sort of call for the code team and wait for the code team to arrive, I don't know. Maybe there was a discussion, they decided this was the best course of action. The rad tech, who is an RTMR, goes into the room. There was purportedly a phone call between the rad tech and a supervisor or somebody. Policy said that the rad tech was empowered to push the quench button, but the rad tech thought, I may be empowered to push the button, but I'm not empowered to make the decision that the button needs to be pushed. That's somebody else's call. So they called and couldn't get a hold of whoever it was who said, for God's sake, push the button. So the rad tech runs into the magnet room. Now imagine the ICU nurse is sandwiched between the magnet and the bed, being attracted to it. The nurse essentially grabs the rad tech grabs the nurse by the side, by an arm, and does that. Literally tears her from out between the ICU bed and the magnet. She was badly injured from the impact, but being torn from between them probably didn't help very much. So this is the picture that we saw, and there was a lot of confusion at first. People thinking that, oh my God, is this a picture with the nurse there? Did the nurse essentially get shoved into the bore of the magnet? As best as I can guess, and it literally is my guess, I think we have the nurse, and the bed essentially comes and slams, well, the bed and the nurse move together, presumably, and pins the nurse between. The description of the injuries of the nurse talk about deep penetrating wounds that essentially run from the right side of her abdomen to her lower left thigh, and essentially a line of injuries, penetrating injuries. They had to go and take emergency surgery. They were pulling metallic bits of the ICU bed out of the wound. things that broke off inside of her. Patient, miraculously throughout this whole thing, patient gets bucked off of the bed when the bed starts flying, lands on the floor, and apart from a bump or a bruise or whatever, is otherwise unharmed. The potential for, grievous patient injury was clearly there the whole time. So this is that doorway. This is the door into their magnet room. I want you to notice what's on the side here. Ferromagnetic detectors. Do you think an ICU bed has a fair bit of ferromagnetic material in it? Yeah, a few hundred pounds of ferromagnetic material, right? After the accident, there in the State Department of Health report, it says biomedical engineering went in to test the ferromagnetic detectors, and lo and behold, found that they were working just fine, which means one of two things. Either they were working just fine the day of and nobody paid attention to them, or they were so poorly integrated into their workflow that they unplugged them or turned them off. Because that thing goes beep all the time, why don't we just turn it off, right? The reason it goes beep all the time is because you're about to bring something extraordinarily dangerous into the magnet room. As an aside, alarm fatigue for ferromagnetic detection systems is, in my opinion, not a problem with ferromagnetic detection. It is a problem with workflow. If you don't use it as an opportunity to say, wait a minute, what should we have caught further upstream, you are misusing your ferromagnetic detector. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. So we understand better how it happened and what exactly the sequence of events. Why did this accident happen? And why did it happen when at the same facility they had a patient vent go in the magnet a few years prior? Take a close look at this. This picture, which has the vent in the magnet, and I'm going to jump back to this one, which has the ICU bed. There's one critical difference between those two. What? The lines on the floor, right? You notice the blue painter's tape box on the floor right there that presumably was where that guy was supposed to be parked, right? And it wasn't. Well, if the blue painter's tape didn't work, we'll just put colored lines on the floor. That'll fix everything, right? Didn't work so well for the ICU bed, right? The lines on the floor only work if the people know what the lines are there for. Why it happened. This is an excerpt from the California State Building Code. And full disclosure, I haven't been able to yet get information about which version of the California Building Code this facility was designed under. Now, building codes are weird because you design a building, you submit it to the State Department of Health, and in that moment, the State Department of Health says, what is the effective building code today, right? And state departments of health are notoriously slow for reviewing and approving